Sue Fendrick. Give it up for Sue Fendrick. So I'm sure many of you have had this kind of experience where you meet someone new and you have so much in common and you're just like, oh, hello, you're my new best friend. So that's how it was with Marcia. We met at a conference, we just clicked. We had a lot in common. We were both single and Jewish, lived in Philadelphia. We were both thinking about going to rabbinical school. And we quickly discovered we had something else significant in common, which was that we were both children of Holocaust survivors, my mother and her father. But there was a big difference in that piece of our histories because I had grown up knowing all of the stories about my family, and she really knew what she knew could fill a thimble. Her father was very closed-mouthed. She knew about 2 sentences about her family's history. So Marcia and I became the kind of friends who talk on the phone every day. We took a biblical Hebrew class together, so we saw each other in person at least once a week. And our conversations would meander, as they will with close friends, through all sorts of topics in and out, sometimes returning to our shared, though different, family histories. And at one point, she was talking about just how little she knew. And I said, I know, I mean, you don't even know what town your father's from, right? And she said, oh, well, no, that I know. I mean, he has this like memorial book or something. And I said, well, what town is it? She said, it's something like, well, it's in Poland. It's like ZLOC, something like that. And I said, ZLOCZOW? She said, yes, how do you pronounce it? And I said, it's Zlochev. There were 12,000 Jews there at the start of the war, and 100 of them survived. And my mother and grandparents are from that town. She said, well, that's all I know, except my grandfather, who I was named for, was Moshe Pick, and he had a fruit store. And I guess he lived in Zlochev, as you said. So I said, Marcia, I'm hanging up, I'm calling my grandfather. So I called my grandfather and I said, Zaida, using the Galicianer Yiddish for grandpa, Zaida, in Zlochev, did you know a man named Moshe Pick? He said, oh, sure. I said, he had a fruit store, right? And my grandfather saying, it was as if he had just spoken about it yesterday. He said, not a fruit store, a wholesale fruit business. So I said, okay, well, Moshe Pick, who had a wholesale fruit business, his granddaughter is now my friend. And my grandfather said to me, oh, we didn't know what happened to the son. Nobody's been in touch with him. So I said, well, the son's daughter is my friend. We talked a little bit, we hung up, and I called Marcia back, and she was, I think, a little bit stunned at this point, at this kind of window onto her past. And we decided that in a couple weeks we would go visit my grandfather. So we did. We drove about an hour from Philadelphia to Freehold, and we sat around his kitchen table for hours. And my grandfather first began by telling her more about Moshe Pick, for whom she had been named, and then told her more about her surviving grandmother, who she knew as a very anxious person, and as my grandfather confirmed, she was nervous before the war. And then he told her what he remembered about her father as a young teenager. And then he began describing to her, room by room, the interior of her grandparents' house. We spent about 4 or 5 hours with him. I am ashamed and chagrined to report that, of course, we audio and videotaped none of it. By the end of the afternoon, she was also calling him Zaida. A couple of months later, Marcia and I were on a road trip, and I called my grandfather from the road, and she took the phone to say hello and spoke to him, and then I got back on, and he said to me, you hear? She called me Zaida, and that's okay because she hasn't got the Zaida. Marcia was married the following year, and my grandfather was invited not just as my date, but as a guest in his own right. And we were sat in a table all the way at the back of the room so that the loud sound of the band wouldn't bother either his hearing or his hearing aid. So I love to dance at weddings, so my grandfather sat there and I came up and danced a lot, and I would, keep my eye, glance over at him, see how he was doing. Every, few songs I might go back and sit with him, say hello. And one time, I forgot something, which is that he had come to the wedding with the understanding that he should not approach her father, because we knew that it was a bit complicated for her father, that my grandfather was coming to the wedding. We didn't know exactly how he felt. And so he did not. But in fact, Marcia's father did come up to him. They exchanged a mazel tov and a thank you for having me and thank you for coming, and a very brief acknowledgement of their shared history, and then her father went on and spoke with many other guests. So here I am, dancing, watching my grandfather, checking in with him, making sure he's okay. And at one point, as the simcha dancing is swirling around me, I look back at him, but the chair is empty. And I'm thinking, what happened? So I look around, I can't find him. I'm looking through the whole room, and then I look over and I see at the edge of the dance floor, there is my grandfather, just taking it all in. And I knew, even before we talked about it later, what he was thinking. Was a time, Mom and you. Was a time that I never thought I would ever see another wedding again, let alone a wedding with all these young people dancing, a wedding of a child of Zlotchev, a Zlotchever kind. My grandfather died less than a year later, but not before he got to be Marcia Zaida and almost dance at her wedding.